your expertise, and your willingness to engage in a discussion. I'm really looking forward to the exchange. Thank you, and back to you, Elena.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and yes, I thank you also to all the partners who've engaged in this. I think one thing I'm excited about this discussion is that everyone who is coming, all of you all, but also many of our great conversation starters are also people who have engaged with both of us across different levels, and so we hope this will be a very interesting discussion where we can compare and reflect in a useful way for the future. So before we kick off, maybe I can invite my colleague Umo to share the screen, and we can very briefly show you the brochure so you can have a look and see how you may choose to use it if it's useful for yourself. So this is the brochure, Unpacking the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. There are the different sections that I mentioned before about introductory look at the GCM. This is designed for people who are interested or maybe have heard of it but are not entirely sure exactly what it is, want to understand more about the basics before jumping into discussions that the UN network, for example, holds to help people understand in a snapshot what it's all about, what the different avenues for engagement are, why it's relevant, etc., as we mentioned. And we also hope that this is a useful tool for many of you who run or work with different networks of grassroots organizations, who work with partners who are also grassroots and maybe are interested. So we are very happy to provide this brochure as a resource. We have it available in English, French, and Spanish. And we welcome anyone wanting to use it. Please let us know if you do, and that we're here on hand for any discussions, any feedback, any also questions about it. So with that, maybe we can then start a very hopefully insightful discussion. I want to invite three conversation starters to join us for this first bit. Mr. Chiranjeevi Bara from the National Network for Safe Migration based in Nepal, who I believe has just joined us. Paddy Siyanga Knudsen from the African Non-State Actors Platform, and Vladimir Paspa from the GCM Network Spain. All of our wonderful conversation starters have had lots of experience working with different grassroots actors themselves or partners in having these discussions around what the GCM is, why to engage, how to engage, and also have very interesting initiatives, I think, in how they've localized it for their own work. So maybe I can start with the first question. And if Mr. Chiranjeevi is there, maybe we can add him as well. I'll try to find you, but we can start perhaps with Paddy and then to Vladimir and Mr. Chiranjeevi for the first question, where you have about 3 minutes. As grassroots organizations or networks of grassroots organizations, what information gaps or challenges have you encountered when trying to engage with the GCM and similar international migration governance? Over to you, Paddy.
Thank you, Alana. I think very, very close to the hearts of most grassroots organizations is to have information that is easily accessible, one in their language, but also not just the language in terms of, is it English, is it French, is it Spanish, is it Arabic, is it Swahili, is it even more of a regional language? But also what is the nature of the language that's being used in a lot of the materials. So from the African Non-State Actors Platform, we have a lot of organizations that are either networks of grassroots organizations or work very closely with grassroots organizations or are themselves members as grassroots organizations. And this is some of what we would often hear. There is also something about, having the possibility, again, I'm still on the information point, of how to navigate websites. Now, I know a lot of us know, for example, that the United Nations Migration Network has quite a broad website that provides a lot of different information. I think, as a matter of fact, it's being updated quite regularly. But it's also sometimes contains information that cannot be very easy to navigate, and also sometimes it's not available in the language. And so, platforms such as ours and many others that are available in many other regions, what we try to do is sort of bring the language much closer to people, because we see this as a first point. And so that, information that is being provided, it becomes sort of a privilege for you first to speak English in these platforms. And so that if you're multilingual, you stand a better chance. But really, this should not be a place where we're tested for our languages, but really for what we bring on as migration governance actors and practitioners and experts, and those who are working, if you like, on a day-to-day basis with migrants. So I would say one is just that, that whole package around how we're packaging information and where we put information. The other thing is also that, again, still on information, I find, is that a lot of what we're doing is either now these days happening on a webinar, and some people may not have had previous access to engage one-on-one. And what we found is that when we're sitting sometimes on a screen, there's a lot of confidence. And then we'll say to one of our grassroots colleagues to say, hey, it's time, we think you can participate in such a place. But because they haven't been exposed, again, to in-person conversations, and we're talking across the border. So with government, they're probably used to, but with regional bodies, for example, or even at that international scene, that becomes very difficult. My very last point is access to places where we're holding global conversations. We all know that for the IMRF, a topic that's very well covered in the brochure that you've just presented to us, we talked about many ways of how to engage at the IMRF. You can do a side event. You can approach your government and do some advocacy. You can meet them in the corridors. But well, guess what? Up until some months ago, many African governments, or rather many African nationals, have been closed out by the United States in terms of being on a bond list or a ban list. Maybe on a bond list is a little bit better, but on a ban list, meaning that even if you have this visa, can you get to the United States? And then maybe you have the visa, but what's the safety that is going to be there for you, as we have discussed in many other spaces, looking at what's happening in the United States around migration itself and towards its own citizens. So a lot of things that we can unpack. And my last point would be disconnect. So there's that disconnect that people see when you watch the television and everybody's aspiring for things that we talk about in advocacy, and then they see a very different ball game in the multilateral space. So there can be a lot of discouragement, and I think these are quite pertinent issues that we can look at in terms of challenges that people are actually facing, among many others. I'll stop here.
Thanks so much, Paddy. That's really great to hear your preliminary thoughts. And I think this, like as Suzanne put in the chat, the information gaps is something that's very challenging for everyone, and the language as well. So when we come back to you, I want to ask maybe a bit more specifics about how you've tried to simplify this. But maybe over to you, Nyamigo Vladimir. How have you also seen these challenges in your network of grassroots and mixed organizations?
Bueno, primeramente saludos, agradecer a la ICCM y también a GIZ por esta iniciativa buenísima. Y luego, mi nombre es Vladimir Pascuel, soy un inmigrante en España. Tenemos allí la red de asociaciones de inmigrantes, que es vital. Y aquí quiero matizar, asociaciones de inmigrantes. Y luego, por otra parte, tenemos las grandes ONGs que nos están colaborando, apoyando a fortalecer. Aquí también remarcar lo que ha dicho Paddy. ¿Qué pasa con los compañeros y compañeras indígenas de Latinoamérica? Cuando llegan a Europa, hay una enorme brecha en el idioma. Luego, también nosotros, como latinoamericanos, solo manejamos el español en su mayoría. Las nuevas generaciones quizá ya vienen con el inglés incorporado, pero también es una generación de jóvenes que sus familias son con mayores recursos, pero en cambio las familias que tienen pocos recursos no han aprendido, no han cogido una academia para aprender el inglés. Por lo tanto, la mayoría de los documentos que tenemos son en inglés y esa es una grandísima dificultad. Los compañeros, ustedes mismos, cuando yo he asistido a nivel internacional, me da como vergüenza o tengo temor porque no sé comunicarme más que solo en español y no tengo esa información. Entonces creo que aquí hay que hacer un gran trabajo para acercar la situación del idioma. Otro de los retos fundamentales en nuestra región es la cuestión de los derechos humanos y la inseguridad. Latinoamérica vive una situación de enorme inseguridad. Por lo tanto, hay que luchar, hay que trabajar para proteger los derechos humanos de la población migrante y, por supuesto, que los gobiernos se impliquen en esta gran defensa de los derechos humanos. Muchos de los migrantes retornados que están empezando a tener acá, a implantar pequeños negocios, son fácilmente extorsionados y esas iniciativas empresariales, pequeños negocios, cierran, fracasan y nuevamente se ven abocados a migrar, ¿no? Luego, la integración socioeconómica, educativa, laboral es, nos hace falta muchísimo en esa situación, cómo integrarnos, cómo también el aspecto educacional de nuestros niños. En Europa hay un enorme fracaso escolar de hijos e hijas de inmigrantes. Y ahí se está creando una sociedad a dos velocidades. Los autóctonos que van a una velocidad por arriba y los hijos de inmigrantes que van en un segundo nivel. Por lo tanto, el conflicto social se lo ve en el futuro, igual que pasó en Francia, ¿no? Y luego la necesidad de la cooperación regional. Hoy mismo vemos una falta de cooperación en nuestra región, en Latinoamérica. Cada gobierno ha sido fácilmente llevado a la corriente, a una línea de Trump u otros en contra de Trump. Y allí los grandes perjudicados somos los migrantes. Y simplemente quiero dejar de aquí la importancia de que los migrantes estemos organizados, la unidad. Y aquí GIZ tiene, y también la ICCM, tiene una grandísima responsabilidad. ¿Cómo apoyarnos para estar unidos? ¿Qué es lo que pasó en la regularización de España? La regularización en España no es fruto de que el gobierno decidió a regularizarnos. Fuimos más de 900 organizaciones de inmigrantes de toda índole, que allí buscamos, miren, un común denominador, regularización. Eso nos unió, 900 organizaciones. Recogimos más de 700,000 firmas y presentamos una ILP, una iniciativa legislativa popular al Congreso. El Congreso allí lo dejó dormir, pero luego, fruto de la presión, y allí un elemento importante, las alianzas, por ejemplo, con la Iglesia. La Iglesia, la Conferencia Episcopal Española, presionó al Partido Popular para que dé trámite. Y allí, miren, la importancia de otros aliados. Creo que ese es un grandísimo desafío. Los migrantes a veces nos juntamos solo entre nosotros. Tenemos que buscar aliados como el movimiento LGTBIQ, el movimiento de mujeres, las mujeres del campo, los campesinos, etcétera. Ese es fundamental, esto es buscar aliados para hacer frente, que nos apoyen en nuestra lucha. Y luego, por último, en esta regularización, la importancia de buscar ese sentido, esa lucha común, y luego logramos, ¿por qué? Porque también buscamos otros aliados políticos, otros partidos políticos más pequeños que decidieron apoyarnos. Y así fue como salió la regularización. Como ven, importantísimas las alianzas, ¿no? Las alianzas. Luego, y por último termino, que se me ha ido el tiempo, la cuestión de los datos. No hay suficientes datos y eso creo que es importante, sacar datos de niños, de niñas, de mujeres y por supuesto de toda la migración. Muchísimas gracias y lo siento por haberme pasado un poquito de tiempo. Gracias.
No, gracias, Vladimir. No, no te preocupes. Y muchas gracias para destacar la cuestión de datos, de información, pero también las barreras de no tienen una clima para participar, sí, para organizar. Es muy importante también para la inclusión de los migrantes. And then maybe we pass to Dr. or Mr. Chiranjeevi for your thoughts as well on the question. Perhaps I can say it one more time for you. But as grassroots organizations, what informational gaps or challenges have you encountered in trying to participate in something like the GCM at the national level or international level? You're muted, by the way. Sorry.
Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Please bear with me if there is any internet disconnection. I'm in the field for research and then in the state of Odisha of India. I'm returning from the field to my hotel and I just found it a small hotel here, a small house here, and sitting under the lamppost, asking the person, house owner, to allow me to use the internet. So if my internet connection is lost, please bear with me. Organizations are struggling mainly with the information when they because they are working at the grassroots level with the community people, and their main aim is to serve the community through information or through other inputs. However, their information to the community and support to the community itself is not enough to gain the or to achieve the desired goal. And this has to be taken to the national forum, to the international forum, to the regional forum. Some of the grassroots organizations, they do not understand, or they do not know that regional and international forums are the forums to reach or to take their advocacy forward. They themselves do not know. But others who know it, they do not have the information that when the forums, different kinds of forums, international, regional forums are there, when they start, how to apply to the forums, and how they can take forward the issues, and what will be the priority issue that they have to take forward. These are the very information gaps that grassroots level organizations like us are struggling with. And another, when the recent scenario, current scenario, global scenario to migrants is quite challenging, and including the GCM, the coming GCM forum, IMRF, and even for others, GFMD forum also. So because there is a visa issue, you know, many migrants and many participants have not been able to secure visa, and it's not because of their fault, not because of their weaknesses, but because of the global structure, global governance change. So the grassroots organizations themselves are being the victims of the global governance system change. So another problem that they are facing with. But my observation in the field is that mostly the grassroots organizations like us, have the information gap, and then technical gap also. They need technical support, they need clear information from any supporting organizations or supporting agencies. Yeah, so this is all that I can say at this first round. Over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chiranjeevi. And I think that you have connected really well to what both Paddy and Vladimir have been talking about both needing the conducive environment in order to engage. And I think that the visas is one that we have discussed a lot, especially about this upcoming IMRF, where many of these, both, nationally in terms of it being in capital cities, but also internationally in terms of it being largely in countries and cities like Geneva and Switzerland, New York in the United States, where many of us grassroots organizations that we face, and those from the global majority, face significant visa barriers. And many governments with diplomatic passports, UN agencies, don't encounter these issues. But for civil society, for grassroots, for the communities actually being affected, we have to go through the lengthy visa processes that can take months to wait for an appointment. And this means that there's almost two levels of participation, right? Those who are automatically allowed to be in the room, and those who have to pay money and jump through these hoops for it. And so thank you for raising that as well. Maybe we can then come to round two, which I think connects very well to Paddy. We've heard a lot about information gaps, and I know the African Non-State Actors Platform do a lot to try and demystify a lot of these areas, and also advocate for overcoming barriers like visas. Maybe you can talk about how you have tried to overcome these, or try to resolve them at an international level.
Elana, to resolve, that would be the magic bullet. I think all of us would rush to that webinar if there was a space to resolve. But because somebody had said that sometimes information asymmetry is injected in the design. but there is something about civil societies that there is resilience. So I'm just remembering closer to something similar to the GCM is the GFMD. And when we were to make the trip to Colombia, so many meetings to try and understand. It was the first time I was going to Colombia. And I think that if I was not sitting in a civil society space with people from Colombia, from outside of Colombia, who are close to Colombia, but also more importantly, Action Committee, a GFMD civil society mechanism. I know they're more or less the same people that really went through, I think, was it 7-page administrative note. Now, somebody would say, but Paddy, you've traveled to Brussels. Wouldn't you just know how to get to Colombia? No, because you needed someone that brings this information closer to you. And so I think that one of the things that the African Non-State Actors Platform has benefited from is being part of global networks and part of civil society networks that help to digest this information. And that also, and that's the second layer, that you've got leaders within the platform that dedicate time to be informed and pass on this information, because there's something to be informed and then there is something about passing that information. And so that infrastructure within networks becomes very important. Who do we rely on to give us information? So that I think is also very important in terms of the passing on of information. How do we pass on information when we've received it? I also think when we think about the visa, I learned attending the IMRF in 2022 that time is really money. The fact that we received invitations, information about going to New York and even being sponsored by the IOM very late meant still that you had to pay high costs. But I would not have known even where to go if it was not Migrant Forum in Asia talking about which hotels you could go to. And so this kind of networks become very important for us. And that's why I speak about the leaders, I speak about the members, but I also speak about passing on information and sharing information. I think I'll bring a close to this. I was wondering that with all the visa information we're hearing, with all the processes around, for instance, how to comment on the Secretary General report, we're waiting for the progress declaration, what it will look like, with all the national monitoring, who actually wakes up in government and says, today I want to inform civil society about these processes? Because you know what? We're doing a consultation next week. A lot of countries have just done consultations in this last week. I want the civil society to be a little bit aware before they come. I think in most of the cases, not many. And so how do we find these allies? And how do some of us as civil society hold on to these allies and continue to engage with them? My last point is WhatsApp groups. The platform literally survives on a WhatsApp group. When we had kicked off, we started a WhatsApp group. When we moved to a website, the members voted against moving to a WhatsApp, to move into a website, because there is something that happens on a WhatsApp group. It's an informal space where we can share information. Oh, today the EU has signed a pact on this. What do you think? Can I get some advice? Oh, I heard if you have to travel, who is going to the World Social Summit? Are we doing something about the financing for development as migrants? A lot of information that's shared in an informal way. It's not on LinkedIn where I have to put sophisticated language or use an AI tool. I just speak the language as I'm speaking to my peers. So I think this use of informal platforms remains important for us, even as we continue to formalize. So we remember that we really don't leave anyone behind in the space in terms of information, as being parts of spaces where grassroots organizations and civil society feel comfortable to share and to get information. I'll stop there for now.
Thanks so much, Paddy. And I love that you highlight the importance of community and solidarity in both your examples, actually, both the WhatsApp group where you can build these trusting relationships, but also with global networks where we are eager to support each other, right? And to share information, to even tips like where to stay is such an important thing. But you also add on to a very important point that both Vlad and Chiranjeevi mentioned about how how we are working with a system that actually does not really accommodate for our needs. It does not help us make cheaper choices. It does not help us to plan ahead. And that is something that we need to keep coming together to raise as being an important issue, because there are many things that we can do with our global community of mutual support. But unfortunately, booking things before things have been announced is not one of them. So we keep raising our voices together. And mi amigo Vladimir, para usted también hablaste de barreras sistémicas, regularización, por ejemplo, y también datos. Por favor, hablas como sí, en su red, como destacar estas problemas y también ayudar en esta red para las problemas, sí. No podemos...
Perfecto, perfecto. Primeramente quiero saludar a los amigos de la red que de España. Ahí veo a Javier, veo a la gente de Pamplona, la gente de verdad que también es un gusto. Esa gran dificultad que nosotros, por ejemplo, hemos tenido en la evaluación del FEMI que ha tenido España, que no nos hemos sentido involucrados. Creo que hay una grandísima barrera allí, una distancia, como que se citó, se convocó a cierto tipo de entidades y a las de base, a las que trabajamos en el día a día, pues no, han pasado de nosotros. Entonces creemos que allí, ¿cómo hacer ese acercamiento, no? Y luego también quiero recalcar lo que ha dicho Paddy. Nosotros en la evaluación de hace 4 años, cuando fuimos a Nueva York, importantísimo cómo nos recibieron las comunidades de base indígenas de Centroamérica y Suramérica en el Bronx. Fuimos a la zona que la llamaban peligrosa, pero en donde estaban nuestros hermanos migrantes en los subsuelos viviendo. Entonces creo que también ahí es como lo que se está mencionando, cómo estamos construyendo esa red que no es visible, que inclusive los gobiernos o algunas personas no la quieren porque en la red nos permite vernos fuertes, nos permite arroparnos, prestarnos su habitación, su cama, darnos un plato de comida y al mismo tiempo hacer mayor fuerza en la lucha por los derechos de los migrantes. En esa línea también es lo que estamos hoy mismo trabajando en España, por ejemplo, cuando vamos a Barcelona y hemos hecho las reuniones con los compañeros de Senegal y allí compartimos la vida mismo de ellos desde sus bases, desde su esencia misma, ¿no? Luego cuando hemos estado también en Pamplona. Entonces, nosotros vamos construyendo esa red muy despacio y también buscando esa misma sintonía, porque los problemas que nos atañen son los mismos que en varios temas, por ejemplo, los compañeros africanos, asiáticos, los compañeros latinoamericanos. Entonces, creo que tenemos varios denominadores común. Hoy mismo lo que hemos dicho en España, el no tener papeles. Y allí esta red se está moviendo. Nos hemos reunido con la secretaria de Estado, con la directora general, y le planteamos nuestros requerimientos. Y creo que solo allí hemos sido fuertes. Y creo que allí está el trabajo, inclusive de este grupo que nos estamos reuniendo hoy. Esa es la fortaleza, el juntarnos y el buscar objetivos en común. Que no nos veamos como competidores entre nosotros, sino como hermanos que vamos avanzando en la consecución de nuestros derechos. Gracias.
Gracias, Vladimir. Sí, y yo veo también al colega de Barcelona, Sam, ahora, pero sí, vamos a abierta para más comentarios después. Panelistas, also for you, Mirana, I think we may have lost Mr. Chiranjeevi, but when he comes back, he can join the discussion again. But I think we have a lot of food for thought also in the comments. Thank you everyone for your additions as well to this conversation. And I want to invite maybe 2 more people to come in and comment on what has been said already. Mr. Paul Nana Kwabena Rampa Mensah from the Ghana Center for Democratic Development, who I believe also engages with Paddy in the African Non-State Actors platform, and our other colleague Lucia Ramirez Bolivar from De Justicia, to comment on what has been said so far, and also add to the discussion in terms of the gaps you find, how you overcome the challenges. And I also want to point out one question that someone had in the chat, maybe for all the panelists as well, of do you have examples of how grassroots actors have influenced these discussions and this advocacy? Thank you. So maybe Mr. Paul, do you want to go first, and then we'll hand over to Lucia?
Yes, thank you so much, and thanks very much, Paddy, and all the panelists who have submitted. I agree with your submission of information, especially demystifying migration and migration programs in the language that people at the grassroots will understand and follow. I always say that migration discussion is not for us, the elites. It's not for us, the national level civil society groups. It's for the victims, the migrants who are mostly at the disadvantage. The unfortunate one mostly, especially about 70% of my data in Ghana tells you that the affected victims are in the rural enclaves. Yet our terminologies, our vocabulary, and our communication seek to target specific group of people who can understand the technologies. So there's a disconnect between what policies we want to implement to influence the lives of the many migrants and how the technologies are used to reach them. So the language barrier is one of the problems that we face in implementing what's the targets we set ourselves, both for the regional, national, and global, for safe migration policies. Even we, the civil society organizations, with the exception of those who are based at the capitals, who have a bit of capacity and resources, how do we also connect to the local-based civil society organizations who carry the information to the grassroots? That's this also a problem that we see. So I share mostly some of the things that we've spoken about. For example, in Ghana here, we're trying to bridge that gap. So with the support of GIZ, we have formed the Coalition of Civil Society Organizations on Migration with an expert who was a former UN worker as coordinator. But usually, how many people can you bring together? So we are having a conference next week. Because of constraint, the GIZ is saying we can bring only about 10 people from the 16 regions. How do you even select those 10 people? So the gap keeps going. And in the theory of information communication, as the information travels from the global to regional to national and getting to the grassroots, if you don't have expert communicators, the adulteration, misinformation, and distortion is also a problem there. So information access is a major problem as far as migration management and its advocacy work is concerned. Then there comes to what is the specific language you are using. In Ghana, we have several multi-languages that we use. How do we reach out to the people who are the actual beneficiaries of the global compacts? Are we translating it into my language to the other language? How do we make sure that we don't even distort the imports of the compacts? So there are critical information gaps that we have, and talk about capacity, talk about resources. So there are some of the things that I think they are catchy issues that we will, no matter how we try to bridge it, it's still a problem that we need to come for. Then talk about the conformity to free movement protocols that come aboard to ensure that we have regional, global, sub-regional connectivity to civil society. I was back when GIZ sponsored me to the Regional Review Forum in Ethiopia, and at the forum, about 10 of the participants had been detained at the airport because of visa issue. Look at that. People who have been invited through the Ethiopian governments that have the government immigration backing have been detained, let alone me, the ordinary person, trying to enter different countries across board. So the issue of even if you have support to go to New York, when is the timing? When is the processes? Ghana, for example, we have a very open, because don't forget we are a champion to the GCM, Ghana has volunteered to be a voluntary champion. So everything the government tries to include us. So the country report we're developing, we've had about 2 meetings that we are doing together. The civil society organization through GIZ is meeting to do assess impact to compare what the government report will be to have integration. Yesterday, when did it start? We are going in June. We started just last month. How effective and impactful will the assessment and review be? And how extensive and coverage of every civil society organization who works on migration will be. So there are critical issues there, even though there are efforts, a global, regional effort to ensure that we have a safe compact implementation process, but there are critical challenges here that we do. So I'll end my discussion there, but I add my view to these challenges, language, accessibility, and impact as our efforts are concerned.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think that's really helpful to hear as well, like specifically from your context, how you have encountered these, and how even in the GCM champion country, you're also facing these challenges that we see at the global level around the timelines. Because you're so correct that involving people too late, even if it's a good effort of involvement, it still has the same outcome. So maybe Lucia, we can turn to you as well to also comment from your perspective.
Thank you so much, and thank you to AC and the MEC program for the invitation. I work for the Justicia, a Center for Legal and Social Studies based in Colombia. We are a civil society organization that works closely with migrant communities and grassroots actors, but also I would like to highlight that we are not a grassroots migrant organization, but our aim is to connect local realities with international migration governance. We are relatively new to these different international spaces related to the GMC, but we would like to share our experience trying to incorporate a relative new topic in the discussions of the GMC, because we believe it is a live tool that needs to constantly change and evolve according to the needs of migrant populations. And that's the case of the topic of care and the right to care, particularly for migrant women. And also I would like to echo some of the challenges that other colleagues have mentioned before. So related to the right to care and the care work performed by migrant women, we have seen that it is difficult to highlight in these spaces like gender experience of migration. So for example, care responsibilities, both paid and unpaid, that shape who migrates, under what conditions, and with what risk, are generally overlooked and is treated as a private or secondary issue rather than a structural dimension of migration governance. So we also have seen a lack of policy-related data and evidence on care that impact these discussions at the GMC. So information on unpaid care work, transnational care arrangement, and the care economy is often fragmented, underreported, or excluded for these debates. So thanks to the support of the international and regional civil society networks, as well as the international cooperation, we have tried to overcome these challenges by reframing care as a governance issue and trying to incorporate this topic in many civil society interventions related to the GMC as possible. So for example, we participate in the regional review of the GMC, the roundtable discussions, and we sent inputs to the background notes. But we echo the challenges that other colleagues mentioned before, because this is not something that all grassroots organizations can do because of the lack of access to information, the language barriers, and other challenges. Also, to address the lack of data related to care work and migration, we have promoted strategic use of qualitative and gender-sensitive evidence. So, for example, we are working on case documentation, testimonies that allow us to demonstrate patterns and structural impacts, showing that life experiences constitute an essential evidence for the effective migration governance. So we are trying to explicitly linking care work and the right to care to the GMC objectives, to position the right to care as an essential element of safe, orderly, and regular migration. And a second challenge that I would like to highlight is the distance between international frameworks like the GMC and the realities experienced in the ground. So while the compact includes strong commitments to human rights and gender equality, these principles often remain abstract and difficult to operationalize in national policy discussions. So I don't know if other colleagues have experienced difficulty trying to link the GMC to specific legislations and advocacy efforts. So we are trying to address this challenge by acting as a bridge between different levels. So this means trying to translate the GMC commitments into concrete advocacy tools at the national level. So for example, we are working on a research paper that we aim that help us to provide specific recommendations for the government at the local level, so they can incorporate the debates about the right to care in concrete policy measures in their efforts to address migration. But we see now a disconnect between the discussions that are happening at the global level and what is happening at the national level. And finally, there is a persistent capacity and resource gap. So engaging in these international decision-making spaces, as my colleagues were saying, requires time, expertise, and funding. And we have found also that when talking about specific issues like gender and care, those are topics that don't necessarily have resources. In general, migration debates and efforts lack of resources, but now specifically because of the international discussion, gender issues are perceived as threatening, so it's difficult to talk about these issues. So we consider that addressing this requires long-term investment from not short-term consultations, but more like capacity strengthening of civil society organizations to really contribute to these debates. So in conclusion, I would like to say that influencing international decision-making under the GMC requires recognizing many issues, but we also are really focused on gender and care, not as a peripheral issue, but as the structural components of migration governance, because we consider there is no like the objectives of the GMC will not be accomplished without recognizing the right to care. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lucia. And I think I also want to highlight one of the important points you raised there, one of the threads, which is that all these commitments and discussions are nice to have, but without the actual political commitment, the political will, the resources to back up the objectives, the principles, and things like gender sensitivity, etc., is brought up a lot in the discussions of the GCM. But if there's no resources behind it, there's no actual commitment to create change, then people are stuck in discussions and not in action. So thank you so much, and for raising those important points that you want to bring up as well. We will open the floor soon, but perhaps we can have a very quick reminder of how this floor will work, because we're having a slightly different format today. I will ask my colleagues to share the specific slide where it shows what the instructions are, but I see some are already doing it. Essentially, we're going to keep our commenters and our panelists on the screen, and we will ask everyone who wants to speak, please raise your hand, and we will add you to the visible panel, and you'll be invited to speak for roughly 3 minutes or so, 2-3 minutes. Give your comments, and then we'll move on to the next person, and maybe after 2 or 3 we will have a look and see if any of the panelists would also like to comment. But the idea is to kind of keep a rotating number of people. We will have maybe 3 additional people on screen at any particular point, so please raise your hand, and once you're done speaking, please lower it, and we will be able to have more people to join the discussion. So yes, and please remember to mute your mic, turn your camera off, etc. if you're not speaking. So with that, maybe we can have Mirana join us first. Mirana, please.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais parler en français. Euh, donc, pour répondre directement à la question, je trouve que c'est vraiment difficile d'essayer de motiver les associations à la base à participer parce que quel est l'intérêt pour eux de changer au niveau international alors que ce qui compte pour les associations à la base, c'est en fait l'environnement national dans lequel eux, ils œuvrent. Il y a toujours un peu cette dichotomie. Ce n'est pas parce qu'au niveau international, on avance ou on recule, qu'au niveau national, on n'avance pas. Par exemple, moi, j'ai l'impression au niveau international, on a beaucoup reculé par rapport à l'environnement de la migration, mais qu'au niveau de Madagascar, donc au niveau national, pour moi, on a énormément avancé. L'autre chose aussi que je voulais ajouter, c'est que nous, par exemple, dans le cadre du GCM et notamment de l'IMRF qui aura lieu au mois de mai, on est un groupe d'une vingtaine. On a la possibilité, on a eu 4 associations accréditées, donc on peut être une vingtaine. Et on a déjà plus de place. Mais là, ce que je voulais dire, c'est que on a essayé de changer un peu de manière d'aborder en fait l'IMRF. Et on s'était dit, on a déjà été à l'IMRF il y a 4 ans, et avec les résultats que nous connaissons, parce que la plupart des personnes qui sont là ont été là-bas, et on s'était dit, et si on changeait, et si on travaillait autrement? Et donc là, on est un groupe d'associations qui mettent la main à la pâte. On est des associations qui réalisons des activités sur le terrain. Ça, c'est vraiment notre point commun. On est tous africains, mais cette fois-ci, on a mis dans notre groupe des personnes issues du secteur privé, parce qu'on ne peut pas garder l'entre-soi, en fait. On a un peu cette tendance à rester entre société civile. C'est vrai qu'on se sent beaucoup plus fort, mais quand on veut voir des changements sur le terrain, il faut pas qu'on reste entre nous, parce qu'on est toujours d'accord entre nous. Mais on a besoin, par contre, on ait les gouvernements. Et donc là, on essaie de monter un groupe bien sûr, comment on appelle ça, des side events, mais avec plusieurs gouvernements, parce qu'il faut plusieurs gouvernements pour changer sur le terrain, aussi bien du côté du bailleur que du pays qui est récipiendaire de l'aide, et aussi bien au niveau, que ce soit au niveau aussi des associations qui mettent en place les activités. Alors, la difficulté, moi, je trouve, et c'est vraiment la difficulté que je rencontre, et pourtant, je trouve que c'est vraiment un point important. Il nous faut tirer la base, et il nous faut des nouvelles personnes qui arrivent sur les places de plaidoyer. Parce que quand nous serons fatigués, quand nous, on en aura marre, ou quand on n'y croira plus, il ne faut pas qu'il y ait une place vide. Il faut qu'il y ait d'autres gens qui soient déjà prêts, qu'on a déjà préparés, qui soient déjà là, qui soient prêts à prendre la relève. Il ne faut pas qu'on voit toujours les mêmes personnes, que ce soit toujours les mêmes personnes qui aient la parole, parce que sinon, on a du mal à passer le bâton et à transférer en fait les connaissances et la capacité de plaidoyer. Et donc ça, c'est quelque chose qu'on essaye de faire aussi. Et c'est pour ça que, par exemple, on a été à Séville. À Séville, on a essayé d'emmener des associations qui n'ont jamais été sur le terrain, qui n'ont jamais été, pardon, sur les places de plaidoyer dans les grands forums. Et là, dans le cadre de l'IMRF, on va emmener des nouvelles associations qui n'ont jamais été dans le cadre d'un grand forum. Et on a demandé aux associations qu'on a déjà tirées dans le passé dans d'autres forums, on leur a dit à votre tour de tirer d'autres associations. Et c'est comme ça, en fait, qu'on arrive à tirer un peu arriver à avoir une masse critique de société civile, et parce que ce sont des personnes qui viennent du terrain, ils ont les informations dont les pays ont besoin. Parce que les pays n'ont pas besoin en fait, les bailleurs, les pays, ils entendent tout le temps la même rengaine, mais ils ont besoin d'avoir en fait le feedback qui vient du terrain. Parce que c'est ça en fait qui manque aussi, et ça c'est vraiment très, très important. Maintenant, le problème, et ça a été déjà évoqué dans le chat, on va tirer les associations qui viennent de la base, mais on va systématiquement éveiller, comment dire, ils ne vont pas nous faire confiance parce que d'abord, aller à des forums comme ça entraîne des frais qui sont quand même énormes, surtout aller à New York. On connaît tous le coût d'un hôtel à New York. Et donc, pourquoi eux, ils devraient plutôt investir dans le plaidoyer et non pas continuer à faire du travail sur le terrain. Surtout qu'on sait très bien que les associations de la diaspora, chaque centime qu'ils vont gagner, ils ont tendance à investir dans les activités de terrain. Donc, il y a ça. Et puis ensuite, Excusez-moi, je vais regarder si j'ai déjà tout dit. Donc oui, et ça justement, ça me rappelle un peu, je ne sais pas si vous vous souvenez, il y a 4 ans, John Bingham, quand on était en train de... Ok, je vais finir par John Bingham. Quand on était en train de partir justement à New York, il avait posé cette question-là. Est-ce qu'on ne devrait pas d'arrêter d'aller dans les grands forums et plutôt continuer le travail sur le terrain? Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Mirana. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, and you raised a lot of very important points over both the barriers, but also what is the real impact and the purpose of going to these spaces. And I think that connects a lot to what Lucia was saying too about dialogue leading to actual commitments and action, and also the barriers that we face even within our own civil society community to actually engage. And so I think that's why the mutual support, the sustained support for those who want to engage in these spaces is important, but also having opportunities for those who do not have much opportunity to speak up, but also make sure that we all understand collectively what we're trying to do together, right? Which is that we understand the value of the international spaces as setting agendas, but knowing that impact can take time from there. So how do we align across the different levels? Maybe I can now call Suzanne to add to discussion and in terms of what her organization is doing, the different challenges, etc., that they face as well, and how they've overcome it.
Yeah, greetings, everyone. I'd like to add to the speaker's very insightful messages, especially on Paddy's points. My name is Susan Baldago, migrants workers representative to a women-led diverse community of over 250 members from different countries. I see very clearly the information gaps our communities face. Many workers, especially domestic workers, do not receive clear, simple information about their rights, complaint mechanisms, or available services, and even when the information exists, it is often in the wrong language, too technical, or not reaching those who are most isolated. So there is a real gap between what is written in policies and what workers actually understand and experience. On a personal level, one of my hardest challenges is when a worker comes to me in crisis and expects immediate answers, while I am still trying to confirm the latest procedure or find the right institution to approach. It is emotionally heavy to carry their fear and pain, and at the same time navigate systems that are not always clear or accessible. To respond, we started building our own community-based information system. We organize rights awareness session, translate key messages into different languages, and train leaders from each nationality to act as focal points and peer educators. We also work closely with other CSO, NGOs, international partners, and where possible, the government bodies to clarify and speed up procedures and coordinate referrals for legal, shelter, and psychosocial support. Personally, what keeps me going, even when I feel tired or overwhelmed, is seeing how one clear piece of information or one successful referral can change a worker's situation and give them back some hope and dignity. Thank you, Elana. Back to you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Suzanne. I think it's amazing to hear the work that you do, but also to acknowledge how much a lot of this work also weighs on all of us who are trying to help, and how spaces like this is hopefully helpful to share some of this burden, that we understand each other and we can help to also support in some of these endeavors to find the right information, to find the right allies, etc. Then I can pass to Ivana, who I know has been also active in the chat. Ivana, would love to hear from you.
Hello, my name is Siva. I'm a Ukrainian refugee living in Bulgaria, and I'm a founder of Grassroots Women Refugee-led NGO. And we have a lot of problems on Balkans. And first of all, what I was thinking right now, that a friend of mine and my colleague from United Against Inhumanity sent me this link. I didn't even know about this project going, and I didn't know nothing about GIZ program. So we have always a lack of information about the possible grounds where we can speak and reach to. We know all about the big one like UNHCR, different events or whatever, but we don't have much information about these. So here is the question. When we have a lot of information going on and we get overwhelmed with all of that, you should look through LinkedIn 24 hours, watching of what events would be and where you can go or where you can fit. This is a problem for little organizations. For example, I do everything pro bono. I don't have any people that are working paid because we do pro bono. So I have to spend a lot of time searching around and thinking of where I can fit. Also, I have some ideas on the solutions on the challenges. First one is for sure, I wrote about the research. We need to have a building community generated evidence, because conducting by the refugee-led organizations peer-to-peer surveys is something that is really valuable because we get the direct information from the field, basically, and it is really different from the official surveys. And we can fill in the gaps where the official data is missing. For example, I had a meeting with International Justice Mission, and all of us know that on Balkans we have a trafficking hub, and Ukrainian women are #1 in prostitution officially because of the refugee and because of wars. But there is zero cases with the Ukrainians for the last 4 years officially. But we all know that if we go to a local community level, then we find out women in prostitution, we find out gender-based violence cases, but they are not reaching out to INGOs or to the local NGOs that are supposed to work with the Ukrainian because of lack of trust, because of language barriers, and so on and so on and so on. So I did my own research on that, and I would be happy to share with it because it has really valuable data. Also, I would like to speak about the strategic partnership and coalition building because when we go together, then we have some power. In Bulgaria, there is not much refugee organizations working like refugee organizations. Most are humanitarian, Bulgarian, Ukrainian. I think I'm the first refugee local organization that is done without any locals. Also, the collaboration with the international organization, Ombudsman's Office, thematic networks, and are very important to validate the grassroots findings. I'm working with representatives of the Ombudsman Office of Ukraine in Bulgaria, and he calls me and say, Eva, how many people do we have now in Bulgaria? Nobody knows how many refugees there are in Bulgaria. Nobody. One resource says 700, the other 1,000, and the other resources telling about 100,000, and nobody knows definitely. So here's a big question even to the official organizations. Also, I'm thinking about the leveraging cultural and community spaces as informational hubs, because when we do some dialogues with refugees and the local communities or mentoring initiatives, it should not be only like advocacy tool, but also informal data collection environments where the trust exists. Here's a big, huge question about the trust between the communities and the governments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva. I think you raised many points. It's great to hear your experiences as well, and then also the work that you're doing. And we totally understand too the difficulties in trying to disseminate information about opportunities. There are many people having discussions, but everyone only knows who exists because we know already, right? And people will know to follow someone if they've heard of them. So we invite you to join our following discussions. We hope it's also useful.
I would be happy.
Please do. And I think, if you can can make good connections and alliances from here, we'd be very happy to have you. But the point you make as well about trust in data collection is very important, especially considering today's climate, where there's a lot of governments who are not necessarily utilizing information to protect migrants. So that's another challenge that we face. I know that we're also going to run out of time soon in terms of having the discussions, but we still have Joseph and Cesar. But if anyone else would like to intervene, please raise your hand now so that we know to add you to the list. So Joseph, please. You are also muted, by the way. I don't know if you can hear. We'll see. Joseph, can you hear us? If not, then we can check with him in the chat. I don't know if he can hear us, but maybe we can pass to Rex, who I see has a hand up.
Yeah, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, good afternoon. I think thanks for the organizing, and I compliment every other person who has been contributing. Yeah, but I think I have just a remark. And from all the things the different speakers have mentioned, the lapses, the problem, I think one thing we have to reflect about is also the sincerity of purpose with these whole processes. It has to do with funding and who is doing the funding and what are the conditions tied to this funding. I think this is a very big issue that we shouldn't forget, because when we talk about lack of information and talk about problem with awareness, the issue is it depends on who we want to reach out to. Most likely, I would want to talk about like institutions like GIZ, for example, that is also projecting this program. What's the issue is, are they really ready to empower grassroots community engagement in this GCM process, or they have certain institutions they want to work with, they have certain templates that you must concede to before you work on that? So I think it's a big problem. So we have to also question the sincerity of purposes with these big institutions like GIZ and otherwise. I think this is the bottom of everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Rex. Thank you very much for your comment. And I think, yeah, I completely agree as well with your points about funding and the systemic issues around that, right? In terms of the whole landscape, I think there's a lot of reform, a lot of reviewing needed to do, a lot of reflection, and we hope that we can help to promote some of these discussions and these practices altogether. Paddy, I know that you want to come in and comment. Perhaps I can call on you before we go to Cesar.
That's okay. I had actually seen Cesar's hand go up and then it's come down. So we can also let's just hear from Cesar before I share some reflection.
Great, sounds good. Cesar, would you like to come in?
Hola, hola, ¿cómo están? Disculpa que precisamente una llamada muy rápida. Bueno, un saludo a todos, Héctor, Elana y Omu, volverlas a ver. No, bueno, quería comentar una cosa muy puntual, que era que sí, de cara, creo que al FEMI y a otros eventos puntuales que vienen, sabemos algunas barreras y situaciones que están pasando, pues muchos no sabemos, a pesar de que estamos autorizados y vamos por el tema visa, bueno, entre otras situaciones. Pero creo que una gran tarea que hemos hecho, sobre todo aquí en Latinoamérica, con el bloque latinoamericano, incluso con la ROCON, es mucho el proceso de unirnos en redes y hacer comentarios. Creo que esto puede ayudar mucho a determinar no solo qué pasa en los países, entendiendo que algunos aún no han arrancado el tema de las consultas, sino también cómo poder unirnos en estas redes que, aunque algunas organizaciones no vayan, podían o podrían decir qué es lo que sucede, qué es lo que pasa y cuáles podrían ser las recomendaciones específicamente. Y creo que algo que hace falta mucho, y bueno, que en Chile lo hicimos, que era explicar un poco las buenas prácticas. O sea, realmente qué se ha hecho de bueno en algunos países, entendiendo a qué ha llevado eso, cómo podría ser aplicable a otros, y con eso podríamos gestionar en el caso de espacios como ese, que van a estar otros países y digan, bueno, si en tal país lo hizo, ¿cómo puede haber una interlocución? Que esto puede ayudar a también una colaboración consular de una otra forma que a veces se requieran para documentos esenciales, para obtener documentos de regularización, que va la redundancia, pero también cómo gestionar algunos procesos adicionales, ya sea de integración, cohesión social o también gestionar algunos procesos que puedan llevar realmente a colaboraciones más regionales que se requieren de una u otra forma para mejorar el proceso del tránsito de las personas, entendiendo al fin y al cabo que la movilidad humana no es algo que podamos restringir, que es algo natural en el ser humano y que también hay diferentes procesos, también por el mismo conflicto armado de algunos países, bandas organizadas, pero que tampoco nos podemos descartar. Y bueno, Colombia ahorita que está siendo, en el caso de yo que estoy acá, muy golpeada por una crisis climática donde prácticamente un condado o departamento entero fue inundado. Entonces, ¿cómo poder empezar a estructurar este tipo de cosas y conversaciones también, ir orientándolo a estos espacios? Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, César. Y sí, creo que el punto sobre el poder de comunidad y intercambio de las experiencias, de las maneras para cambiar su situación en cada país es muy importante también. Y sí, para destacar también los efectos del cambio climático, también otros situaciones es muy importante. Maybe then I see you, Paddy. I think Paddy and Vladimir would be good to go back to you both, and then we can have maybe be the last person.
Thank you, Alana. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm hearing myself very low. Okay. No, I was just thinking so many interesting reflections shared from across the regions, and it really like we are, you know, we are kind of facing some common challenges, and you can see some common threads around them. And I think again, just to say thank you to, you know, the Action Committee Secretariat and GIZ for bringing this conversation together. That, as Andrea had said, it started off from a need, and now we see how deep that need runs. You had asked a question around, you know, having, you know, sort of having worked together with grassroots and being engaged in this work, you know, where have we seen sort of the transformation and change? And I wanted to put Andrea a little bit on the spotlight, not because, and I'll tell you why. When we were working on this brochure together, I felt that even I changed in the way we began to understand something so commonly known, right? And we had a lot of these conversations where there's words that we use and we've taken them for granted that they mean something to everyone. And yet when we speak to people who are outside of that particular lingo space, those words don't have a lot of meaning. And instead people will say, oh, do you mean visas? And we continue saying, oh, you know, legal pathways, do you mean visas? So how do we continue to call things as close to the real life language as possible when we are bringing information across to migrants and to those who are working with migrants in grassroots organizations? So that's one thing I would say that really transformed for me. Another example I wanted to give is also thinking a lot in the mother tongue. A few years ago, I went for a big event in diaspora and investment conference, and the topic was on remittances. And it just struck me to start walking around with my mobile phone and just asking everyone, and these were all industry experts, people from all, you know, central bank governors, civil society people, and a lot of different people from the sector. And I would just walk up to somebody without announcement and say, hey, what is remittances in your mother tongue? And there's not one person that gave me the answer like this immediately. Everybody said, I have to think about it. And it sort of taught me that remittances are something that maybe in English or as a person who works around remittances sounds very familiar. If you ask somebody in their mother tongue, not in English, but I'm talking about like your maternal language. If English is maternal language, you're lucky, then it's remittances. But then a lot of people in Spanish, in Italian, in Swahili, in Chinese, in any language, they took 2 seconds to say, you know what? actually have to think about it. And there were many descriptions of what that meant. Some of it really went to a very dark place, and some of it went to a place of love, and some of it just came to a place of duty. And so I think it teaches us a lot of things about how do we bring language that we use in the global space and break it down so that it really can make a difference. And I think this is important when we're working with women, when we're working with young people, when we're working with the elderly, when we're working with the disabled, when we're working with those who cannot speak the language that we're used to communicating with in global forums. And my last point was also just to kind of pick up on not getting rid again of, I was going to say don't get rid of the post office. Why? I'm sitting here in Denmark, and after so many years, they've decided that the Danish post office does not work. So there is no post office in Denmark. They closed everything. And 24 hours before they closed, people were going out to buy the post boxes, you know, the traditional ones that are found everywhere where you put your letters. It doesn't exist anymore. And I want to say, don't get rid of the post office. Why? Because some of us are still using very traditional ways of communicating. How we communicated in storytelling, how we communicate in passing on information in our very own indigenous ways is still the way we can do advocacy at the national level, at the global level. And also to say influencer life, and I really wanted, my heart went out to Suzanne as she was saying, influencer life, because this is what we're doing, can be very hard. So where do we find allies to build the energy when we're exhausted? Because the exhaustion is not just because it's work. The exhaustion is because you have a burden that you cannot pass on the right information to somebody who actually needs it. Thank you, Alana.
Thank you so much, Paddy. And yes, I mean, I really resonate with your last message and with Suzanne's point as well about the sharing emotionally and having that mutual support. But I also wanted to really highlight your point about how many of these issues of language is actually not even about understanding a technical term, but that those terms are based in a different culture. They are based in the culture of global technocracy, right? It's not about culture, like local culture is not about families, it's not about communities, but it's based in understandings that are made by economists. And unfortunately, remittances are not salaries, and there's so many different aspects of things that cannot be translated, cannot actually be quantified in the way that they want because it does not manifest in that same way. So I think that's a really interesting point, and I hope we can continue discussing it at another point as well. It could be a whole different webinar. Vladimir, and then maybe.
Bueno, en la línea de camino al FEMI en Nueva York, para nosotros, para nuestra red, pensamos que no es el objetivo ir a Nueva York. El objetivo es construir red, esta red. ¿Cómo la fortalecemos? ¿Cómo nos hacemos fuertes para luchar por los derechos? Y quien quiera que vaya, que lleve nuestra voz y la diga allí. Y nosotros nos quedaremos en nuestros territorios haciendo esa lucha diaria y permanente por los derechos humanos, ya sea de los niños, de las mujeres del servicio doméstico, de los campesinos, de los hombres que trabajan en estos sectores deprimidos, mal asalariados. Yo creo que allí está el objetivo de este encuentro y allí debemos trabajar. A mí me da un gusto enorme cuando me encuentro con estas amistades que nunca en la vida pensé tenerlas. Y hoy construimos red y luchamos por esos objetivos comunes, que es los derechos de las personas migrantes, para que podamos vivir con dignidad, derechos políticos, derechos sociales. No hemos abordado los derechos a nuestra cultura, lo que está diciendo Paddy, mi raíz, mi indigenismo, mis danzas, mi manera de mirar, de vivir las cosas, de alimentarme. Y otro tema importante que creo que también, ojalá algún día también abordemos es, ¿qué está pasando? Los migrantes nos estamos haciendo viejos y no estamos tratando a los migrantes ya en su etapa adultez, que nos olvidamos en dónde están, a dónde nos recurrimos. Hay centros de mayores. ¿Cómo estamos viviendo esa situación? Les dejo eso, simplemente recalcar, el objetivo no es Nueva York, no nos llama la atención, porque allí no vamos a irle a avalar a ese señor que está maltratando a nuestros hermanos. El objetivo es luchar para que esta situación de este señor morado, rosado que está allí en la Casa Blanca, respete los derechos de mis hermanos y hermanas migrantes que están muriendo, que los están matando, que le están violentando los derechos. Simplemente eso. Gracias.
Gracias, Vladimir. Sí, creo que es muy importante, especialmente en FEMI y los espacios internacionales, para destacar no es datos, no es números, no es políticas, están humanos también, sí, y todos somos humanos también. Y si la comunidad internacional no es por los humanos, ¿qué, qué es el punto? Sí, cuáles objetivos para esos espacios. Y finalmente, Navy, ¿quieres hablar?
Bueno, buenas tardes. Nuevamente, yo soy Neivia Lloví, yo soy afrocolombiana. Para los que no me conocen, yo me dedico a ver o visibilizar los temas en común que tenemos la parte negra de Colombia, la parte del litoral pacífico con África. Nos hemos identificado y nos hemos dedicado a ver que lo más común que tenemos es este desplazamiento porque siempre ha habido una guerra. Cuando tú migras, no migras porque quieres ir a otro lugar a sufrir. Migras muchas veces porque tu vida está en peligro o por simplemente eres el pilar económico de tu familia y poderla sacar de esa pobreza o de esa situación de vulnerabilidad que dejaste atrás. Nosotros los migrados tenemos doble trabajo porque ser migrante es un trabajo, más encima tú tener recursos para poder sobrevivir en donde llegas y poder ayudar a tu familia que está en país de origen. Nosotros siempre hemos tratado en estos espacios, cuando lo transmitimos a nuestra gente, tener un lenguaje claro, porque a la final los que estamos aquí, los 56 personas que estamos, ya estamos identificados, ya estamos haciendo parte de la red y estamos haciendo una construcción para gestionar. Obviamente que muchas veces del recurso, el 90%, hablo recurso humano, económico, emocional, pues lo ponemos nosotros. O sea, el otro 10%, que es el económico, que también es muy válido, lo conseguimos, pero la parte emocional, que somos sostén de mucha red, es importante y esa, digamos que esa salud mental asociativa que la hemos dejado al lado, sería súper importante gestionarla. También es como una invitación a que nosotros sigamos siendo parte de la red y cada vez seamos más. Pero para poder ser más necesitamos información más sencilla, porque la información a veces es muy densa y tengamos en cuenta que la mayoría no son alfabetizados en su, o sea, la información no viene en su lengua materna, llámese mandinga, llámese wolof, llámese como se llame. Entonces, por eso sí considero importante que toda la información que la bajemos desde una manera más práctica, más dume. Y lo que decía Vladimir es muy cierto, muchas veces no estamos haciendo estos trabajos transgeneracionales. Hemos olvidado a nuestros abuelos y hemos olvidado a nuestros hijos. Nosotros los que estamos acá no. Sería interesante empezar a generar esa unión de los que son nuestros padres y los que son nuestros hijos. Eso es como el aporte que queremos hacer y siempre pues como muy activos porque los que estamos acá no vamos por conocer una ciudad, vamos porque creemos en esto. Esto es una creencia y es una vivencia que hacemos parte. Ir allá, pues chévere porque uno conoce gente, pero más que ir allá es el trabajo que hacemos los 365 días del año. Y eso es como lo que queremos decir, lo que queremos participar y súper encantadísimos que siempre nos tengan en cuenta en este proceso. Porque no me veo.
Gracias, Navy, muchas gracias.
Vale, que tengan un buen día, adiós.
Gracias, buen día, sí. Gracias por su comentario. And yes, thank you, everyone. Just keeping an eye on time that we're almost coming up to the end. And I want to leave some time for some key takeaways to be highlighted, but also to have a short reflection at the end from GIZ and ourselves. So with that, maybe I can hand over to my colleague Umu to give us a few of the key takeaways from this discussion.
Thank you so much, Elana. And thanks everyone for this discussion. I think it was very timely and needed to hear everything, because I think also from the perspective of the Action Committee, we want to think about these challenges and see how we can find some solutions for all the processes that we are engaging in. So I'm going to give you a very short takeaways. First, highlighting the challenges that we've identified, and then some positive outcomes or opportunities. The first one, when it comes to challenges, I found three main overarching themes today. The first one is around language justice perspectives, because many of you have highlighted the impact of language or institutional language that often creates a gap between what's happening on the ground and then what really the policy language at the in these international migration spaces. Then we tend to use, for example, abstract terms that make it difficult to link concrete actions and regional legislative frameworks with the realities again. There were some calls in terms of the need to use real language that connects with migration reality, but also calls for us as civil society and the people that we engage with to target our language. So use different language when we are, for example, with governments or youth, children, government, or local communities. So trying to make those differences in terms of also ensuring that there is inclusion in the way we speak, and to make sure that the message is resonating while still keeping the core of what we are saying in these international spaces. And lastly, under this umbrella, it also falls some themes around the balance between innovative tools and traditional communication channels. So there is an effort that needs to be made in terms of, yes, using technology and different communication channels, but there is also a lot of benefit in the informal channels that migrants and civil society have developed. Then the second theme is around information gaps. And so here, we are talking about, for example, scattered information. We're talking about how really to reach out to actual beneficiaries in the different language, and also the inaccessibility of these spaces. Inaccessible in terms of that it's difficult to find, first of all, to define what are the spaces, what we can get out of it, and then also a simple question such as how to engage. And lastly, we have structural and systemic gaps. So we know that the systems that we are operating in, they don't accommodate our needs. And it's about also the structure of the international systems. And so we see in terms of structural gaps, resource gap, lack of resources, and also lack of attention sometimes when it comes to resources to specific topics. And today we mentioned gender. And then some more structural in terms of accessing these spaces. And so we are looking at visa limitations, or even when we do have the right in a way to be in these spaces, still experiencing, for example, detention, while still we have the official invitations in some of these spaces. And so here it comes also a bit of an emotional burden that a lot of civil society members are carrying by engaging in these spaces. And lastly, I want to highlight the knowledge extractivism, and this was specifically in the chat, one of the comments, but I think it kind of resonates also with the wider discussion, because knowledge extractivism, more in terms of sometimes also inviting civil society to share perspectives, but without offering any concrete avenue for action or not taking those perspectives into account. So there are some kind of issues, of course, around this. And lastly, when it comes to the positives, it was great to hear how civil society is supporting, and we're facilitating the passing of information. Sometimes also we are supporting when it comes to identifying funding and supporting each other through financial, community-based actions. And this really creates trust in the relationships. And I liked one of the, I think Vladimir highlighted the feeling at home in our own community. communities, building slowly informal networks that allow us to be strong, but with simple actions of generosities. And these little gestures are part of our collective strength, and they really help our collective actions. And so I will leave it at that, but I really thank everyone for this amazing discussion, and I'll pass it to you, Elana.
Thank you so much, Umu, for those great takeaways, and we'll be sharing this with everyone as well, the takeaways from this discussion, hopefully to inspire some more pathways forward. And maybe with that, if I would like to give the word very briefly to Andrea from GIZ again, just to give some reflections from his perspective on this discussion and what it means for them.
Yeah. Thank you, Elana. Thank you, everyone who basically took this exchange to one level above. I think this is basically what it is about. I mean, there are very, very reflective statements here and inputs from you. I think, I mean, one is basically that Paddy has mentioned and will stay with me, that information asymmetry is somehow by design, or basically what is the added value of bringing like all of this to the international level. I think there are very, very relevant questions and challenges related to this. But I guess one other very inspiring point, which was brought by Vladimir at the very beginning, how basically over 900 organizations have come together, or basically that the change in the law in Spain on the regularization of migrants is not basically fell out of the sky, but came out of the of forming this network of over 900 organizations. And I think that this is basically also the direction in which we would like to go in which way we can have this international space. It's not a question of whether, it's not a question of it's either the national or the international level, but maybe a little bit of both, where we can share good practices on this international level. And as Vladimir has stated as well, about building a network to see how others are facing these challenges together. And of course, I mean, this is a dialogue. I think this is the first step. And then we have to see together also on what this language around the GCM means. But this language of the GCM is basically also one of the very first international frameworks in which we can bring all of this together and also advocate for everything. But yeah, I think I would leave it at that. And I really, really like this exchange. I hope that we can have more of this in the future. I think the fishbowl format is a success from my end. But so thank you very much to the speakers here, to everyone that has participated, also to the translators as well. Muchísimas gracias. Y también por la excelente moderación de Elana. Yo no sabía que también hablaba español, entonces estaba sorprendido. Bueno, entonces muchísimas gracias de mi parte.
Muchas gracias también, Andrea, and all the speakers, todos los hablando también. And yeah, I think Andrea said everything that I would like to say as well. I think this has been a very rich discussion, and I always feel it's amazing when we end one of these civil society discussions with 3 million ideas for new ones. And I hope that we have the opportunity to come together and discuss the global solidarity, the community that we're building. The sharing is so important, especially in current times, but also for going forward. And very grateful to colleagues like those here, but also at GIZ for allowing and helping us with this space to actually deconstruct a lot of these assumptions that underpin maybe many of the difficulties that we face in trying to implement these objectives and trying to create a better world. So we will have more discussions as well. We will also have consultative dialogues around some priority thematic areas. Please do sign up to our mailing list if you want to join similar discussions to this. And we hope to see you all soon. So thank you very much, speakers, participants, Umu and Hector, the team as well, working really hard to put this all together, and the GIZ team, interpreters, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Evening. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Au revoir. Merci beaucoup. À bientôt. Bye-bye.
Vale, gracias, adiós.
Gracias.
Gracias, adiós.
Thanks, Paddy. Bye. Ending the meeting for all.
Bye.